So how many would you like to see?
I would like to see 1,000.
1,000?
Yeah, I would like to see 1,000 growing licenses. Wow. And if you want to get rid of the black market and keep prices so that people can actually afford them, you need 1,000 licenses. I mean, maybe start with a few hundred and work your way up. But
how many dispensaries?
Unlimited.
This is the Empire State of Cannabis.
So, Allan, welcome to the hot seat that is the Empire State of Cannabis show. We're sitting here in one of your drying barns, one of two here on your property in Cortland. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Kalen.
Absolutely. So, we just walked through your field. It's about 35 acres of hemp, right? And you're in the midst of harvesting.
Yep.
So you expect that harvest process to go to the end of October, very hard. Why don't you walk us through a little bit of the operational perspective of harvest and kind of things that you have to get ready for and what's going on over the next month and a half that's making you gray hairs?
A lot of gray hairs. So luckily this is our third year growing hemp. But what a lot of people don't realize before that, we're a large-scale organic vegetable farm. So for the last 10 years, we've been growing a lot of vegetables, and we're very used to doing a lot of acres of one crop. And so luckily for us, getting into hemp, we had the infrastructure, the fields, the tractors, the employees. Our farm staff probably has hundreds of years combined of organic farming experience. And so when we got into hemp, it was just an additional crop like tomatoes or carrots. We grow a lot of carrots and cabbage and beets and hundreds of thousands of pounds of those crops. So we're very used to moving large amounts of product in and out of our fields through buildings, track and trace, food safety. Those are all things that we had coming into hemp. And so now that we're on our third year of growing and harvesting, we've got our systems down. We've increased our efficiencies. We know exactly how much it costs us to plant, grow, harvest, and dry a pound of biomass. Yeah. And I think the first couple of years in the market was really, the prices were really high. People were getting $30,000 an acre, $40,000 an acre for their biomass, and that's just not the case anymore. So you have to be extremely efficient and extremely lean, and there's really no time to waste. Now during harvest season, the harvest window is pretty short. We only have a couple months to really get everything out of the fields, and so usually the stress this time of year comes to making sure we have enough labor. We have a lot of local labor here, but we also use H2A workers from Jamaica, have enough drying space. So this building alone is probably 25,000 square feet, and we have several of these buildings to fit all our crops inside. And we fill the buildings, we let them dry for about a week. We have industrial dehumidifiers, we take it down, we fill it, we take it down, we fill it, and doing that multiple times. So, this time of year, it's just making sure that everything is running smoothly, the fans work, dehumidifiers work, trucks work, tractors work, because not only are we harvesting hemp, we're also bringing in hundreds of thousands of pounds of vegetables for winter storage
at the same time
that all end up going down to New York City.
Oh, wow.
Over the winter. So it's a big, it's a big production. There's a lot of coordination, a lot of logistics.
How many people are working in that period, that harvest
period? In that harvest period, between our H2A workers and all of our local people, we are somewhere in the 20-something people.
Wow.
Yeah, probably 25 people. We have a lot of part-time seasonal people who just come in right now just for the harvest, and they'll work until usually we're done harvesting vegetables by Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So it's a big push this time of year.
So and all the material is pretty much going into your extraction facility. So you're essentially what most people consider a vertically integrated operation because you have a brand, Head and Heel, right? And you do your own extraction. Is there anything that you have to sub out and go off the 5-mile radius of your operations?
Not really. There's very little that we don't do. We take all of our own material and we turn it into winterized crude here. We have our own, manufacturing, our own bottling. Everything's very small scale. We built it just for ourselves pretty much, and we do a little bit of toll processing for other farmers and manufacturing for other brands as needed. But, we didn't have the money to come and build a $20 million massive facility, so we did everything to the scale that we could really afford and really operate at.
But that still makes you one of the largest operations in the state.
Yes, that still makes us one of the larger people right now in the hemp space. And a lot of that has to do because when you're manufacturing, as you know yourself, when you're extracting and manufacturing to GMP 111, supplement standards, there's like a minimum baseline of money you have to spend. Like you need clean rooms, you need trained employees, you need SOPs, you need a compliance officer. And so, those things kind of dictate your scale. And so we've kind of ended up at this. Yeah, we're like probably mid-size. We're not small, and we're definitely not a small farm. We're mid-size farm, mid-size processor. And so I think we're happy with the scale we're at, and we have extra capacity here so that we can work with other small farmers and process for them and, help them bring products to market if that's what they want to do. When we were doing a lot of vegetables and we were doing a lot of co-packing and we were having people like freeze spinach and make us pesto and tomato sauce so that we could sell it in the wintertime at farmers markets. And with vegetables, it was really hard to find a small or mid-sized co-packer that would like work in our smaller volumes. And that's why when we got into hemp and CBD, we pretty much from day one, I was like, I can't go through co-packing again.
Yeah.
There's not enough vegetable co-packers in the state. There's like very few, and so that's why from the beginning the decision was made to build our own kind of process.
Be vertically integrated.
Yeah, so we could be vertically integrated.
So if you were to start right now, then would you make that same decision, or is it more so reflection of the immaturity of the infrastructure?
At the time, it was the immaturity of the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Right now, I think there's enough processors in New York State that if you're a small farm and you wanted your own brand, there is plenty of people to go to make that happen with very minimal investment. By minimal, it's like $20,000 to $50,000.
So what if you're a small farm that doesn't want your own brand? Is there any place really in the hemp industry for that? Like if you say, well, all I want to do is grow 3 acres worth of hemp and then sell it to someone, does that even work, right?
It does not work for biomass because you're competing with corn and soy growers, huge crop farmers who will grow for pennies on the dollar.
Yeah.
Where it does make sense, and this is where I think our work with the Cannabis Association has been so important, is in the flower market, the high-end craft flower. If you're a market gardener and you can grow really good flower, you should be able to do that and sell that product to wholesalers or consumers or however, whatever your market is, because that's a high value thing. Maybe it's $200, maybe it's $500 a pound. Biomass per pound is the same price as tomatoes per pound. So like, why are you going to grow 3 acres of tomatoes and just be a tomato farmer and sell like canning tomatoes at $1 to $2 a pound? Probably not.
Yeah.
So to do that for a raw commodity, it wouldn't really make any sense. But the high-end flower market, that's kind of like the craft beer market. Like that you can do as a small grower, and I think people should
value-add product without having to put any money into making it a value-add product in a sense, besides the specialty curing.
Well, right, and the curing is a big part of that. But you can build a small curing room, and you can really take care of your crop, and you can make a quality, safe product that a small farmer would be proud of, and a local consumer would be psyched to buy.
And not just a local consumer. I mean, actually, the economics of that doesn't even make sense for a large operation.
Right, no.
So essentially, I mean, there's not much threat of encroachment from the big industries, some with like flour. So let's talk about the New York Cannabis Growers and Processors Association. So essentially, your baby, right? You're the founder. I came on, as a co-founder technically and helped, but it's really your vision. So what is NYCGP? I think a lot of people see it on Facebook and they've seen it. And so what is it? What does it do? And what's the mission of the NYCGP, the New York Cannabis Growers and Processors Association?
Yeah. So when we started that association almost 2 years ago now. At that time, there was only 100 growers. There was like 10 processors, and the state was very unclear about regulations and about guidance and about how to move the industry forward. And so the gap was there for people with knowledge in farming and processing and consumer packaged goods to kind of come in and advise on policy. And the mission is to make sure that small farms and mid-sized farms across New York, processors and brands, are not locked out of the cannabis industry.
Yeah.
That is the number one goal. I think we're seeing a lot of really large multinational cannabis companies trying to get into New York. You had one in Binghamton in your backyard.
Sure.
They, did a lot of fanfare about a very big, expensive facility, and they were going to buy from all these farmers. And we see what happened with that. They've kind of abandoned their facility, they've sold off their farms, and they've walked out on all the contracts that they wrote with their farmers, and people were left kind of holding the bag. And that's really what we're trying to prevent from happening. We're also trying to encourage...
Could you say, though, that that's a result, that happened across the board, and that's a result of almost like an over excitement about the industry and complete over projection, but looking at the future of the industry, it's almost as if what they don't, it's not necessarily what their actions are, it's what the opportunities they take away from, right? So if you have these multi-state operators in these states on the adult use cannabis side or the medicinal cannabis side, and you have 5-10 companies controlling the market, that's not a good marketplace for the consumer. But what you're saying is that's not good because it's going to take opportunities away from medium-sized, small operations that want to get involved in adult use cannabis, which is serious value-add products, or even the hemp industry, right?
Yeah, and it's not so much that we're against multi-state operators or large cannabis companies. Really the situation is more that we don't want the large multi-state operators and the cannabis companies to dominate the market to the point where we can't have small operators because of policy concerns and because of licensing issues, tax issues. We don't want to be taxed out of the industry. So that's really where the NYC GPA does its best work, is really making sure that the regulations that are written and promoted and the licenses that are given out are done so to promote small and mid-sized businesses and farms specifically, because just like we were talking about, that 3-acre grow has a very specific niche, and that is the high-end flower market, whether that's in hemp or adult use. And we need to promote that because we need 1,000 of those farms operating across New York State, not 10 multi-state monster operators. We could have those too, but we need both sides, just like we can have Budweiser and all the craft breweries.
Yeah.
And so it's not that New York has done a bad job with the small scale side of things. It's just that they have not known how to build the industry because there's no one who knew what infrastructure small farms would need in hemp and CBD.
Yeah.
They just didn't know the processing facilities. And so, where we've come in is to really just help guide them along the path so that they did not lock out the small companies.
So one of the major pieces of success that the NYCGPA has been able to do is pass the hemp extract law. But now what would you say to someone who says, well, listen, I hear your mission, but the hemp extract law doesn't allow me to make my own products in my 20-seat commercial kitchen, on my small farm, small operation. You say yourself in the interview that it's really too expensive to do CFR 111, to do the good manufacturing practices and the regulations in order to do it. So, what would you say to that in terms of that these regulations make it overburdensome for small business?
I think part of that is absolutely true, and it really kind of sucks. And when we first started, we were pushing very hard for processors to be licensed as commercial kitchens, as 20C commercial kitchens, inspected once a year by Ag and Markets, just like the sauerkraut makers. But really what ended up happening was that the state thought that was too risky, number one. And number two, the writing is on the wall that the FDA is going to come in very soon and regulate CBD supplements.
Yeah.
And so, it's a fine line to walk because, yes, I would love to only have a 20C commercial kitchen and be making all of our products in it. However, that would be so short-lived because sometime this year or early next year, the FDA is stepping in. And once that happens, then what? We're all stuck in New York rebuilding our facilities.
So you're saying that it's almost like a choice you have to make between an operation such as yours, which can be done on a medium-sized scale,
right,
and Bayer Pharmaceuticals,
right,
or Pfizer, right? So that's the choice, and that pretty much the same way you would treat vegetables is kind of out of the question because it is a supplement product.
Right, because and Department of Health and Ag and Markets would not go for a 20C kitchen.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end, people don't realize that. I think they don't know. I mean, you've been in the room at the governor's office in Albany, in New York City, how many conversations we've had about this, how many studies we've done. You know, the fact is the state regulators, they would have outlawed CBD first before they allowed a commercial kitchen.
Yeah.
And so we had to make that compromise. And because we made that compromise, we're not California. And if you look at California right now, technically CBD is not legal in any product. It's illegal in supplements, and it's illegal in food and beverages, and it's only legal to really be sold through dispensaries. And so we wanted to make sure we did not end up like California, and, you know, for better or worse, we're at supplement standards. And if we did not go that way, you know, we definitely would not be doing any processing or manufacturing in 20C commercial kitchen. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And on top of that, the flip side, where smaller businesses are like upset about the supplement thing, if you want to go sell at any grocery store or real retail, like with a real value-added product, they expect it to be a supplement. You can't.
Well, you're selling it. You're labeling it as supplement.
Yeah, you're labeling it as a
You're telling people you're giving them a product to supplement their health.
Right.
So therefore, it is a supplement if it's not a drug. And so we're trying to say it's not a drug, and you don't want to get into the new drug approval process.
Right. Exactly. No, absolutely not. And so, you know, that is the compromise I think that the hemp and CBD people have had to make across the industry. For better or worse, it is what it is. In other countries, CBD is, and like Australia, it's still a pharmaceutical.
Yeah.
So people might complain that, oh, it's not a 20C kitchen product in New York State. But listen, we kept it from being a pharmaceutical.
Yeah.
And so we could build what I call a small facility. We could never build a pharmaceutical facility.
No.
Then we'd all be out of the game.
Yeah.
And so that is the reality of compromising with.
Well, it's one thing about a facility. It's another thing to be able to bring a pharmaceutical drug to market through clinicals, right? If you're going to go through clinical trials, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. So, on the adult use cannabis side, what are some of the things that you see in the NYCGPA and that you'd like to see, starting with the proposal that the governor put out that's going to help small businesses, right? Because, you know, it's almost like a lofty goal when you look at Colorado, California, and Oregon, Washington. Every single state has an overabundance of MSOs that have locked up the market, right?
Right.
And so how does that not happen in New York, in your opinion?
I mean, in my opinion, and I know people who own cannabis farms, cultivators, processors, brands, many brands, in Colorado, California, in Oregon. I've been to all those states. I've been watching the entire Colorado industry very closely since 2014, just having friends who are started in the medical cannabis space in Colorado. And the only way is for the state to give out a lot of licenses to small cultivators and cap production. Maybe it's 5,000 square feet indoor, maybe it's 2 acres outdoor, some reasonable number. That's one. You can't just give out 20 licenses and say, hey, look, we gave them to small businesses.
So how many would you like to see?
I would like to see 1,000.
1,000?
Yeah, I would like to see 1,000 growing licenses. Wow. And if you want to get rid of the black market and keep prices so that people can actually afford them, you need 1,000 licenses. I mean, maybe start with a few hundred and work your way up. But
how many dispensaries do you think?
Unlimited.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to get rid of the black market and have a true free market and keep the prices reasonable and raise tax revenue, you need dispensaries everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, and people aren't going to open 100 dispensaries in one town because they're going to go out of business. So if you truly believe in capitalism and free market economy, you really do need to hit the ground running. And without getting rid of the black market and competing on price from day one, you have a California situation where you can't get anything done and legal.
Yeah.
Versus like a Colorado, Oregon situation, have the prices collapsed and people went out of business. Yeah, that happens, but it's boom and bust in cannabis. And I think the state can balance those things, but starting out with 10 licenses is just silly. Yeah. It's not going to put a dent in the tax revenue. It's not going to put a dent in the black market. And if they're only going to do it just to say, hey, we legalized adult use here in New York, you might as well not do it because it's kind of unfair to the consumer and for all of the people who have been affected by the drug war. I mean, that's really the worst part, is that you're going to end up with a lot of rich white people buying cannabis legally, not worried about going to jail because they can afford it. And then you're going to end up with a lot of, lower income people who can't afford dispensaries or don't have them in their city because no one's going to buy an eighth for $70, and they're still buying on the black market, and now they're getting arrested. Yeah. And so what have you accomplished in that scenario? Nothing, except saying, but we did adult use cannabis. And that's just not good enough.
Yeah. So what about the cap on vertical integration? Because that's what, the governor's office, and that's what Allan pointed to and said, this is going to help the market mature with more small craft growers. Do you think that is smart to cap vertical integration?
It's hard to say. Yeah. I think we need...
It's never been done. Or it hasn't been done.
No, not really. And I think the smart thing to do is have a board of directors running cannabis in New York that is evenly represented by the industry, by regulators, and by public health experts. And I think without that kind of oversight and flexibility, we just won't be able to be nimble enough to get anything done. Our hemp extracts bill passed in May of 2019. We still don't have regulations, and it's almost 2021.
Yeah.
And if we're going to treat adult use in this way, it's almost pointless, and it's never going to get anywhere. Do I think small growers should be able to be vertically integrated and have on-site consumption and sell off their farm? 1,000% yes. Do I think multi-state operators should be able to be vertically integrated and open unlimited dispensaries? 1,000% no, because that's where you're going to run into problems. And so it's a tough one to do, because from a government perspective, you could be looking at it and saying, well, you're picking winners and losers. But I think from a social justice perspective, from a tax revenue perspective, a public health perspective, that's the best way to go, is to having small operators who can be vertically integrated and large ones who cannot.
Yeah.
Or having only, 3-4 dispensaries, and that's it.
Yeah.
And after that, not letting them open 1,000 dispensaries and buying up all the other dispensaries.
So let's talk about the hemp extract regs. Because we're sitting here at the end of September. Like you said, it's over a year since the bill was passed.
Yeah.
It's been 9 months since it was signed by the governor. Tell us what happens on October 31st and what happens on January 1st, and why it's so important that we have regulations sooner rather than later.
So if you're a hemp grower right now in New York, you're part of the Research Partner Program. That ends October 31st. Yeah. And all of our licenses expire. Grower,
processor too, right?
Processor, we lose our processing license in about a month and a half. And the regs created a system to license processors, new processors, and also created a system to license manufacturers and retailers. Without that system in place, we're all just kind of operating on our own.
Yeah.
And are all these small processors like us going to just stop operating on October 31st and go out of business? No, we're definitely not going to do that. And so if the state wants real regulation and they want a responsible program, they need to release the regs, and they need to release the licenses, and they need to release manufacturing licenses.
What do you think stops the regs from being released?
Who knows? The election.
Yeah.
In reality, I think people at the government level don't want to create any waves before an election. Not like it really matters in New York, but for some reason they're just not allowing those regs to be released.
Yeah.
Could there be lobbying by external forces that we're not aware of? Yeah, could be a possibility, but I think that COVID is, just tied up a lot of resources, and if these regs are looked at as like another place the state has to spend money, obviously they don't like that right now with our budget deficit.
Yeah.
So, but in reality, all of us here are going to be creating jobs. It's going to be, I don't know how big of an industry in New York it will be, but we're in the $100+ million easily.
Yeah.
Probably once the regs are released and we can actually operate, it's a $500 million a year industry in New York, just with our small number of growers and processors and retail brands. And so they're really just letting that go by. That's a lot of jobs and a lot of revenue that we're just kind of missing out on right now.
Yeah.
It's really tragic.
So a lot of the people who watch Empire State of Cannabis and listen to Empire State of Cannabis are farmers. They're involved in the program. They don't spend a lot of time in Albany. So when we're in Albany, yeah, right. We're in Albany. So let's go back to the passage of the hemp extract bill, right? And so hemp extract bill, what happened was it got pulled from the MRTA, which was the regulatory structure that was going to pass and legalize cannabis in 2019.
Right.
It got pulled out at the last minute. Were you surprised at the opposition from the national level in terms of these national trade groups towards the hemp extract bill and the veracity at which they opposed that bill?
We did have a lot of opposition. At first, I was surprised, but then I realized why they're opposed to it, and now I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Our regulations would have been the most comprehensive in the country, and still will be the most comprehensive until the FDA steps in. And there's a lot of national companies selling in New York right now that they just wouldn't meet our standards.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they simply wouldn't meet our standards in terms of GMP requirements, labeling requirements, testing requirements, and they didn't want to have to step up their game. And it was easier for them.
The industry is scared of New York becoming a powerhouse.
Yeah.
Do you think they're scared they won't be able to compete?
No, I don't think they're scared they won't be able to compete, but why allow your competition to catch up to you?
Yeah.
New York is a huge agricultural state. We have a lot of beverage manufacturers. We have a lot of food manufacturing. Our dairy industry is huge. I mean, we're one of the top agricultural states. And so we know how to grow crops and turn them into value-added products. Yeah. And we have the biggest consumer market in our backyard. And everyone knows once the New York companies get in, just like craft beer, we're going to capture a large portion of that market.
Yeah.
If you go in the gas station right now and buy CBD, none of it's from New York.
Yeah.
You can go into Wegmans, there's only 1 or 2 brands from New York, and the rest of the huge display is from out of state. So yeah, those out of state companies are absolutely worried, and not only because we're going to steal shelf space and consumers, but because we're going to show the rest of the country how to do it right.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what they're scared of.
Yeah, I think that's so too. And I think they're scared of that on the marijuana side. I don't know if you saw on the adult use cannabis, I don't know if you saw, but there was a coalition, a group of cannabis associations. Part of that group was the New York City Cannabis Association or Coalition,
yeah,
or something like that. And they are calling on the governors of New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, etc., to make a pact and allow for interstate commerce. And so what their whole reasoning is that these are New York is a consumer state, Oregon and California are producer states,
mm-hmm.
and therefore we should open the market up to them. And because we will take, and this is their statement, that we will take too long to build up an industry.
Yeah, we've heard that argument a lot about taking too long to build up an industry. It's a double-edged sword. If the governor continues treating cannabis the way he's treating cannabis, unfortunately they're right. 2 years to pass hemp regulations, I mean, it's too long.
Yeah.
And if that's what happens with adult use, yeah, I would say it's going to be a problem. However, this is what we've tried to explain to Norman Birnbaum, the chief of cannabis in New York, and all the legislators. We have 700 hemp farmers in New York. We have hundreds of greenhouse operations. We have 100 processors making extracts. We have tons of product manufacturers, everything from tinctures, topicals, beverages, food, and we have the knowledge to bring enough. We need 1 million pounds of cannabis, of THC products, 1 million pounds to squash out the black market and supply the entire state of New York.
Plus the tourism industry.
Plus tourism, yeah. We can bring 1 million pounds. I guarantee, 1,000% guarantee, that we can bring 1 million pounds to market in 6 months. If they say in April 1st, all right, New York growers, processors, manufacturers, retail owners, carte blanche, bring us 1 million pounds all the way from farm to harvest to dispensaries. Within 6 months, there'll be 500 dispensaries across the state. There'll be 1,000 growers, tons of product manufacturers, labs everywhere. We can easily do it and do not need to import 1 single pound of cannabis from out of state.
Yeah.
That would require the governor himself, though, to trust the industry, the leaders of the industry, and to trust ag and markets, and to trust the state legislature and the local municipalities to pull this off. We could do it in 6 months and raise $1 billion in tax revenue for the state.
Yeah.
No problem. I am 100% confident that can happen. But if we do it like we did hemp, it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think that's where
it's almost like a mindset shift that needs to occur at the executive
It's a
level.
complete mindset shift, and they need to stop being afraid. They're afraid of things like diversion. And diversion is when THC from the legal market ends up on the black market, and those are the things they're afraid of, and those fears are so overblown because any high school kid at any time can buy weed anywhere. Go try buying alcohol.
Yeah.
They can't. It's so much more difficult.
Well,
Cigarettes.
they definitely
so much
can't
more
buy
difficult.
moonshine.
Right.
You know what I mean? So diversion occurs when there's not a mature market to sell it into.
Correct.
So when you overregulate or restrain the market in some way, diversion has to occur because the producers need now. It happens in California all the time.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If they're going to stand in Albany and say, oh, we got to tightly regulate this market because of diversion and teenagers and public health, what they've really done is they've already created the problem. If they come out and do this the way that it can be done in New York with our existing infrastructure and resources, our knowledge, our technology, and our capability of bringing products to market, we would have an entire adult use industry within 6 months with 1 million pounds of cannabis. And instead of saying, let's import from New Jersey and Pennsylvania, we would be exporting agricultural commodities, cannabis included, to all those other states. California's #1 cash crop is marijuana.
Yeah.
It's not vegetables, it's not almond milk, it's not any of those things. It's marijuana.
Yeah.
And we would put a serious dent in that.
Yeah.
And that is a mind shift by the governor himself. And unless the governor sees that and really thinks outside the box and puts his weight behind this multi-billion-dollar industry, of course it's never going to happen.
Yeah. So how do people get involved in the NYCGPA and get involved in the movement, and what if they like everything you're saying and they're like, all right, Allan, how do I help?
I think the first step is to go on the website, sign up for our email list, sign up to become a member. There's farmer members, there's processor memberships, and that's the first step. Stay in touch. A lot of what we do it's hard for people to understand because we're putting out fires. When policies come out, we analyze them and we try to change them. And so sometimes there's a lull, and sometimes it's all hands on deck. Yeah. Sometimes it is like last week we had to do press conferences all over the state. We needed a large group of people. We pulled it off. We've got tons of news, tons of press conferences. And that all, thanks to you, Kaylin, that'll happen in under a week time. And so I think people just need to be aware, and they just need to be when there's a call to action. And we don't do a lot of them, but when there is one, that's when we need people to step up. To rally, to come up. If we could ever go back to Albany to do lobby days, how lobbying is going to look like this year, we're not sure. But, we do want people to pay attention. And at the end of the day, once the cannabis industry adult use does become legalized, it is to support your small and your local growers and producers.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how much more do you have left to harvest?
We have probably 30 acres left to harvest.
How many plants is it?
60,000.
Wow.
Yeah, 60,000 plants, and we'll get all of it done by the end of October.
Do you take a day off after that happens?
Who, me personally?
Yeah.
I don't have one planned. Until Thanksgiving, no, I don't take a day off.
Yeah.
Because even once that's done, we're still doing vegetables.
Yeah.
I mean, we're harvesting vegetables in the snow up until it's so cold out that the ground is frozen.
Yeah.
You know, those root vegetables could be harvested well into the end of November. And our H2A workers don't go back to Jamaica till mid-December, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're here for a while. So we go and go and go. And then hopefully I get a day off.
Nice. Well, thanks for taking the time to come on Empire State of Cannabis. Really enjoyed it. I think it was a great conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.